Hey guys, how's it going? It's the Crypto Analyst here, and I hope all of you guys are having a good morning, evening, wherever you guys are from, and welcome back to another Bitcoin Technical Analysis. And now that Bitcoin has fallen under the 50 EMA and has actually started seeing it as rejection, I have a couple theories about where Bitcoin can go from here. So today I wanted to talk about those and whether or not this 200 EMA is going to get retested before Bitcoin even tries for a new high. So if you guys are interested, go and stick around for the video, and do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button, as it does help out the channel a lot. But that being said, let's go ahead and dive on into this BTC Technical Analysis. So first things first, guys, I have a regressional trend drawn up here. I have the fib retracements already drawn up, and then this yellow line is the 50 EMA, while this pinkish line is the 200 EMA. And then what you guys see here as the white lines are kind of my theories as to where Bitcoin is going to go. Now, I drew this up yesterday morning, so they are a little bit outdated, but the same concept and the same theory still applies from here. So pretty much from this point, because Bitcoin hasn't really moved, I think one of the most noticeable things that has happened since then and now is that this 50 EMA area is actually getting used as resistance now, even more so than it was over here. You can see some pretty clear rejection from this price area, whether you want to argue that it's the 50 EMA or whether you want to argue that it's just the straight price action area, the price level of this like $11,900 area. You know, it doesn't really matter, because this is going to be an area of resistance, and however you want to justify that, you can do that. And so from here, I pretty much have three theories on where I believe Bitcoin can go, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be one of these guys, and one of these guys is going to play out, and that's going to be two to the upside and one to the downside. Now, my first theory is ultimately that from here we kind of go up, we retest this area around 12,300, 12,400. You can see why this would make sense. Former support here, former resistance here, and it would make sense why we'd come up here, maybe see some rejection, come back down to this price level where we're at right now, where, you know, really just this current resistance level is, former resistance turns support, again right here in this area, and then continue in this upwards trend and probably go for a new high, or at least a new local high above this area of around $13,200. My second theory would be that we were actually going to retest the 200 EMA from here and then bounce once again. Now, this one is not one that's so far-fetched. This is probably one of the most probable ones in my opinion, just because we've already seen this happen so many times on Bitcoin, and I'll show that in a second here. But basically the way that this would work is that Bitcoin would come back down towards the 200 EMA and then shoot back up to one of two resistance points, even being around this $11,700 area or up to the $12,400 area, maybe seeing a slight retrace but ultimately pushing for a new high. Now that's the second theory, and then the third theory is going to be that this 200 EMA actually breaks. Now, if this happens, I have this as a pretty steep sell-off, because I think that if the 200 EMA breaks and holds, I think that it's going to actually have a significant fall down in price action. Now, why do I have this fib retracement level at the, really at the 50% fib retracement, but also just this specific price area? Why is this my retraced area of choice? And I'm going to go ahead and explain that. So, number one, this is the 50% retracement area. Above this, you have the 618 being the golden fib, which is obviously a perfect level for Bitcoin to retrace to. It's called the golden fib just because of how often it's used on any kind of Bitcoin chart, really no matter what you're measuring. Also, guys, we can see that this was former support now turned to resistance on Bitcoin. So this is going to be one of those areas where it's lots of consolidation. And what we might be seeing over here is that what you do is actually create levels of consolidation support on Bitcoin. So this could have really been our second one. And if I want to go ahead and kind of rewind and get a bigger macro view, well, we could have gone ahead and said this is our first one, then layering these guys in, our second one, our third one, and now we're actually working on a fourth one over here, kind of setting levels of support as we go up over here. And so I think that that's actually a really big possibility on Bitcoin, is that as it's moving up, instead of going quite as parabolic as it was over here, because we can see we're kind of moving in levels, as how this one was more so just, going up. Yes, we did kind of hit like a little bit of levels right in here and before this area, but when this thing started going parabolic over here, it really wasn't setting any support for itself. So now what Bitcoin's doing, this parabolic run around, is it's actually setting multiple layers of support as it goes up, and this is actually a really good, healthy thing to see in any kind of market, because now if it falls and breaks down through one, it is another one, and then another one, and then another one. And so labeling this, you can really argue that Bitcoin already has 4 levels of consolidation support already set in here, and we're actually working on our fourth over here. So covering these 4 areas, what this tells me is that the actual market health over here is actually really healthy, because the way that this is moving upwards in this uptrend, and it's not one of those things where, like last season, where this guy kind of came up, set a little bit of support, and then just went straight parabolic, because when that happens, Bitcoin tends to come right back down, and then, the next support that we have is way back down here. So with this all happening, I think that it's a very healthy thing for the market. But nonetheless, if this 200 EMA breaks, it could be a potential trend reversal. Not to say that it has to be, not to say that it's set in stone. I think as long as the 618 holds, Bitcoin's still going to be very, very healthy, because the 618 is going to be over all of this major resistance that we accumulated over the course of 2018. So moving forward from here, I want to kind of talk about some of the EMAs, indicators, oscillators, and this regressional trend. Now, I've already covered the EMAs, but basically, for the first time in a while, guys, the 50 EMA, as I've already mentioned, is being used as resistance. This is something that's not, hugely significant. It's not as important as the 200 EMA or even the daily chart, but it's something to at least take knowledge of, okay, hey, this is actually a little bit of sign of bearishness. The fact that we are getting rejected from this area isn't necessarily a great sign. It's not necessarily a horrible sign either. We're kind of just hovering around over here around this 236 level, bouncing off of that. So you could argue that that's actually a bullish case for Bitcoin. It's really all depending on how you look at it, because at the current time being, there are a little bit of bearish signs, there's a little bit of bullish signs, and really either side could make a pretty equal case here. I still think Bitcoin overall is more bullish than it is bearish. This lower swing high is just another example of this bearish scenario on Bitcoin. You could be arguing that this could have topped out and that this lower swing high is a sign of that, but in the same sense, you could also be arguing that this is just a regressional trend line that I've actually drawn up, and showing that this thing has just been bouncing from resistance to support to resistance to support, and right off the heart line in between. So here we go from resistance to support, back to resistance, back to support, back to resistance, actually breaking through, then back to support, and then back to resistance. And so here we could actually be working our way back down to support before actually bouncing up here once again. Now, something I want to take note of this regressional trend, and I don't use this too often, but I think that it really highlighted this heart line very, very well. And so on Bitcoin, you can see that this heart line is getting used as support and then resistance right over here in this area. And then over here, it's being used as support and support and support and support once again. And then it falls back down, is actually used as resistance, comes back down into this area, used as support, kind of has a piercing candle action. I wouldn't even call this a piercing candle. I would just call this a retest of support, bouncing off this 200 EMA, coming back up here, using this area as support once again. We can go ahead and get the marker back out, but kind of go ahead and using this area as support once again on this heart line, and now we're kind of hovering in between, which makes me kind of think that this can really go either way, but it might want to retest support here. It would make all the sense in the world. It just hit resistance, so there's no reason why it can't touch support from here. But I think one of the things that needs to be highlighted is that this heart line, guys, right in the middle here is being used so well, and it's something that at least keep an eye on, if nothing else. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into some of the indicators and oscillators over here on Bitcoin, looking at the MACD and the RSI before going back to this candle chart. Now, the MACD is printing a little bit of bullish divergence, nothing too significant. I wouldn't even call this double bullish divergence yet. I just think that it looks more bullish than bearish for the short-term time being. Something that we did notice is that there was a form of double bearish divergence over here that already played out. We talked about this quadruple bullish divergence right before that all happened, and that played out beautifully as well. So the MACD is working pretty well again. It's good to see this, because for a while, if you guys were part of the Discord or even the Patreon while it was up, this is something that we talked about how the MACD and even the RSI for a while weren't being really used very well, especially towards the end of that bear market, towards the beginning of the bull market. You were seeing secret bullish divergence, secret bearish divergence. Sometimes there was just divergence and it wouldn't mean anything. But now what you're having is we're entering into this stage again where these indicators are printing very clear and easy to read divergence, which is something that hasn't been the case for probably the last 4 or 5 months. Over here on the RSI, Bitcoin has retraced it and actually set a higher low over here. I just am now noticing that. In the area, and the reason that I'm able to see that is right over here around this probably 34.17, and then we have a 35.86, which makes this a higher low. I still think that it's very possible, guys, that Bitcoin heads back down towards this oversold territory around this $30 mark, or 30 point mark rather, whatever you want to label this as. I still think it's very possible that Bitcoin gets back down into this region. It would only make sense for me because of on a 4-hour chart, it could actually be either way. And so let me explain this. On a 4-hour chart, when you're having all this overbought action up here, usually you're going to have some sort of a retracement into the oversold territory pretty soon following. However, with that happening, you almost always have a lower high set in before it goes back into this oversold territory, which is something we haven't seen yet. So it's very possible, guys, that Bitcoin goes up over here, gets a lower high, and then goes into this oversold territory. But it's also just as possible that it wants to actually go ahead and retrace this right now and kind of try to touch this oversold territory. So it's kind of in a weird spot, because usually after something that's this overextended in the overbought range, and again, overbought doesn't mean that the price has to come down from here. This is just something that we simply label as kind of like a name to a label to better understand this area. Because it's overbought, it doesn't mean like, oh, well, there's too many buyers, the price has to come down. It's simply just kind of like a figure of speech, so to say. I don't want people to get a misconception about what overbought and oversold means, because the actual terms, if you're taking them literally, don't, quite exist. But from an RSI standpoint, what you would normally have over here is a lower high, then go back down into this oversold territory, rather than it just, kind of go back down from here. And that's really why this is so weird, because this is too big of a gap for this to kind of be any kind of bearish divergence, in my opinion. And this is kind of too awkward of a gap for this to be any kind of bullish divergence. You can kind of say that this is very possibly bullish divergence, but I don't like having bullish divergence when it's so far away from the overbought or the oversold lines over here. So the RSI is in a very awkward spot. Just from my history of working with the RSI for like years, I would imagine that this could very well easily go back down towards this oversold territory, bounce off of this 30 line, come back up into the oversold territory, set a lower high, a lower swing high over here, and then actually probably see a nice sell-off back over here. Now, it's not going to be quite as parabolic as I'm drawing it up, but that's just the main concept and theory that I have that's going to happen on the relative strength index and probably the short to midterm future of Bitcoin. So coming back to this chart over here, guys, there is a couple possibilities of both the up and the downside. Of course, I've labeled this first one over here at the 0.5 fib retracement. Also at some, also at some consolidation support. This is going to be all the way around $8,400, $8,500 towards the downside. The ultimate downside that I see Bitcoin going to, as really is the lowest point that I think that it can go to, is going to be around $7,200. I don't think it can, that it will go anywhere below this point. I would be very shocked if it did. Breaking that would actually be a really, really bad thing to see on Bitcoin, and it would make it extremely bearish again. I don't think that's going to happen, however, and so let's go ahead and talk about, okay, so let me correct that. I think that it can reach these points. I just don't think it's going to ultimately break this point. So it's very possible that it retraces anywhere in here. I mean, it's been a great run so far, but if it wants to continue this pattern and this uptrend and this bull market that it's currently in, ultimately my next height is going to be looking at conquering some of these higher highs. And then, as I've mentioned, numerous times before, I think this next point that we're going to have to conquer on Bitcoin is going to have to be the $17,000 mark. And the reason for that is that it's the last high that we have to conquer, the last swing high that we have to conquer before this $20,000 ultimate all-time high of Bitcoin. And that would be a very exciting thing to see. So wrapping this up, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Are you guys bullish or are you guys bearish? Is this kind of this twist time where Bitcoin's going back into a bear market, or are we going to continue this bull market towards the upside? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.